This video is about how to use starch for gluten-free baking. If you want to learn to make fabulous gluten-free baked goods at home, you need to learn a little bit more about the properties and uses for the different flours and starches available. I've been teaching gluten-free cooking classes for 10 years, and I know that you can learn to make fabulous baked goods in your own kitchen gluten-free. So starches, I'm going to talk about tapioca starch, cornstarch, and potato starch. There are more, but these are the three that I use for gluten-free baking. So why starch? So wheat flour is about 75 to 90% starch. So when we're baking gluten-free, we're trying to mimic some property that wheat flour has, and so we can adjust the combinations of flour and starch to get the product that we want. I'm going to refer to this downloadable gluten-free flour guide that I made when I first was trying to understand the different properties and uses of each of the different flours that I had already been baking with. So first off, tapioca starch. So tapioca, you probably know tapioca pudding or the tapioca pearls that come in bubble tea. So it is ground from the root of the cassava plant, and it gives chew, elasticity, and structure to baked goods. The downside is if you use too much of it in your baking, it's gummy and dense. It is great in combination with potato starch, but not on its own. I buy tapioca starch at the Asian store. It's sold in bags like this. It's about a 400-gram bag. It's fairly inexpensive, and that's it. Okay, cornstarch. Cornstarch you may have had in your kitchen. I've used it forever. My mom always used it to thicken gravy, and so I had this container. When I buy it usually in a box. I buy this one at the Asian store just because it says it's gluten-free on it, but most of them are. And it's kind of messy to work with, so I transferred it into this container, and I've been using this container for like 30 years, and I've just got the handwritten recipe for white sauce on the outside of it. So cornstarch is finely ground starch from corn. It has a smooth texture and no flavor, and it provides stability in sauces and also stands up to freezing well. In baked goods, it can make it taste starchy. For using it for cooking, you do have to be careful. If you whisk it too much, you can break the sauce, and if you have it over too high of heat, it will clump. But it's pretty easy to use. So I think the best uses for it are as a thickener in gravies, sauces, pudding, pie filling, that kind of thing. Also, you can use it to dust meat before you cook it to give it a bit of a coating. And it is also excellent for browning and crispiness in a breading. So my breading that I use, like for pork chops or chicken, has corn flakes and cornstarch. And so I like the properties of that. Okay, and then lastly is potato starch. So potato starch is not the same as potato flour. I use potato starch in my gluten-free flour mix, and it's kind of clumpy compared to all the other ones that are so fine. So when I measure it into a strainer every time I use it. Like when I make my flour mix, I just put the strainer and measure it into these inexpensive dollar store bowls, and then it's nice and soft and easy to mix. So potato starch also gives baked goods a smooth texture, but it also adds to tenderness, and it provides structure and binding power. So I really feel like my gluten-free baked goods were improved when I first started to use potato starch. And it does not have a potato taste. It is not the same as potato flour. The downside, too much of it gives baked goods a crumbly texture. So use up to 20% of it in a flour blend. And it also is great in combination with tapioca starch. And I also buy it at the Asian store. And this is a different brand. Since COVID, there's all kinds of different brands and packaging, but this is also available in the Asian store pretty readily. So that's it for the three starches that I use. So one last thing is this list of 11 gluten-free flour recipes. So if you make a homemade flour mix, or if you buy a gluten-free flour mix, people from my classes tell me that this is really helpful to just see the different combinations that people use, the different amounts, and then it gives you a little more confidence when you can substitute when you run out of something, or if you want to tweak a recipe that you make all the time to just see how that would work and if you can improve it to your liking. So the best way to learn about gluten-free baking is to do it. This is part of a video series on how to use gluten-free flour in baking. You'll find links below to the whole series with lots of recipes to try. I'm Cindy, the Everyday Gluten-Free Gourmet, sharing tips and recipes from my kitchen for more everyday cooking in yours.